Now we're going to talk about our top 3 players that are our team's biggest need, and I'll go first here because now I originally kind of wanted to go guard here because the Vikings have had a problem with the interior offensive line for a long time, almost, it feels like. But even guys like Nick Easton, I liked him, but he wasn't like a permanent fix. I think it's legitimately been since Steve Hutchinson era that the Vikings have had a perennial Pro Bowl guard that truly is able to hold down the fort, pull, a pass block, the entire thing, and just looks good doing it. So I think that from the top to bottom, the Vikings have just struggled when it comes to finding interior. I would say interior offensive line help. So I'm actually going to go. You can do this if you want, but I personally want to do it both through the draft and through the just free agency, the top 3 players that we need. But I'm going to go defensive tackle here. I think at the end of the day, yes, K'Wan Short rather, and Dominican Sue are the top 2. But I even consider a guy like Robertson Harris from the Bears. I've watched him, just what he's done from the Bears, and he's developed into a very nice player. And I think, at the end of the day, if you can get a guy like Robertson Harris for relatively cheap and find ways to address other needs, I think that's the biggest thing is, getting him in relatively cheap, finding a way to get it done, because I think he is a special player. And at the end of the day, I think the Vikings need to take care of some of these issues rather cheap because they don't have a ton of cap space, and I think they're probably going to have to get rid of a ton of guys before they can make any surmountable amount of cap space available. So I think the top 3 players in terms of free agency, the top 3 defensive tackles for the Vikings are as follows: K'Wan Short, Dominican Sue, and Roy Robertson Harris. And I want to hear about guys like Emory Jones, from the Jaguars, or Lawrence Guy from the Patriots, or Daquan Jones from the Titans. No, it's K'Wan Short and Dominican Sue and Roy Robertson Harris. When you're talking about 2 guys in Short and Sue who are making plays, still getting it done. But Robertson Harris is a guy that I think could definitely come on and still, at 28 years old, I think he's a guy you can get 3 or 4 more years out of. Shelby Harris was an honorable mention here, but he's 30, had 3 sacks last year. Now, he's definitely not slowing down, but it's just interesting to see what the Vikings do here. He could probably be a guy that finds his way to the Vikings. But at the end of the day, the Vikings need to find a way to sign an effective defensive tackle rather cheap and find a way to fill one of those holes at least from that perspective. Now, through the draft, this one was harder because I think when you're talking about the Vikings as a team that needs defensive tackles, I would say they should potentially bring in 7 defensive tackles. That's how many defensive tackles they need to bring in. Just find somebody that can play 2 gaps, rush the quarterback, and maybe have some semblance of a pass rush. Because I've watched it for too long this season. Without Linval Joseph, I knew it was going to be tough. But in terms of the draft, I think it goes Christian Barmore, Jaylen Tayman, who I fell in love with immediately. When you talk about it, his hand usage, he's not great in terms of overall getting after the passer, in the run game, but he's great at getting after the passer. And you talk about a guy who this year was a little bit undersized in that 290 range, and usually as a defensive tackle, whether it's 3-tech or you're playing a little bit more nose, you're probably going to be about 330. That's probably what I would like, but most people would like, But a guy in Jaylen Tayman who had 10.5 sacks his sophomore year this year, who's putting on, you can just tell this guy's he's ripped, 290. I think at 3-tech, disruptive, great hand usage, athlete, goes out and gets it. Jaylen Tayman is the number 2 need for the Vikings in terms of the draft. And it starts with Christian Barmore. But the third one, this was tough for me because I feel like 2 players that could really fill this role at number 3. The top 3 players that could fix this biggest teams through the draft. To Darryl Slayton, the defensive tackle out of Florida, or Marvin Wilson, the defensive tackle out of Florida State. And I think at the end of the day, either one would be fine with me. But I'm probably leaning a little bit more towards Slayton because he's that big guy. 6'3", 6'4", 343 bills. That's what you want. You want a run stuffing defensive tackle. You go get a guy that is just 330, just standing in your face. Gets it done. That's what I want. The Vikings, I think, if they were going to target Slayton, probably in that 4 to 6 range in terms of rounds, 4 to the 6th round, probably around there. He might be worth a 3rd round draft pick. He really might, but I think that's probably where the Vikings, because this is a pretty deep draft in a lot of positions. And arguably, I was listening to the Purple Wind podcast last week, and he made the argument that it's one of the could probably be in the argument for a more deeper wide receiver class than last year, which is crazy because there was a lot of wide receivers in last year's draft that were very respectable. So, but this is a deep draft. And I think the Vikings definitely, in terms of those three players, I talk about Christian Barmore, Jaylen Tayman, but I think it all starts and ends with a guy like Tedros Slayton, that they definitely need to find a way to get one of those three players, or possibly two out of those four that I mentioned, because defensive tackle is a major need for the Minnesota Vikings.